It looked like somebody was bent over and had their head in the window of the deer blind, and it either heard me or smelt me, and he pulled his head out of the tent and stood straight up, and that shocked me. They don't make people that big.
The way it moved, almost as if it was gliding across the beach. I've never seen anything move like that in my life. They were screaming at each other in gibberish. It sounded like a language, and they were chuntering away back and forwards, back and forwards, back and forwards. I know what a bear looks like, and there is no way on this planet that what I saw were bears.
What are you reporting?
Jesus Christ, you better...
Sir?
See ya!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
That son of a bitch is about 6'9", I don't know.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh.
This is Nick from Vader, Washington, and you're listening to the best Bigfoot podcast out there, Sasquatch Chronicles.
Welcome to the show, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. Got a great show planned for you. I'm kind of fighting a cold, so bear with me tonight. We're going to be chatting with Trevor, and Trevor comes to us from Michigan. His family owns this huge piece of property out there, and throughout the years, Trevor had heard about family members having run-ins with this creature, and he was kind of skeptical. He continued to hunt it, and in 2021, he ended up seeing the creature. He thought it was a bear at first. We're also going to be chatting with Mike, and Mike comes to us from upstate New York. And in 2017, Mike and a friend of his had an encounter while fishing. I'll kind of let Mike go into that. If you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. Let's jump into it tonight. I want to welcome Trevor to the show. Trevor, thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Wes. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And prior to your encounter, Trevor, what was kind of your feelings about the whole subject of Sasquatch? Is it something you believed in, or was it something you really didn't give much thought to?
I did. I kind of grew up hearing a lot of stories from grandpas and uncles and my father. I believed, but I was also skeptical at the same time, because you don't see something yourself. How do you truly believe it, you know?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are that way. Your
Sorry,
encounter took place in October of 2021 on this piece of property that your family owns. If you would, take me back to that day. I mean, what were you doing and what happened?
I'm an avid bow hunter, so I'm out in the woods a lot. I try to...
All right, there we go.
I probably hunt more than the average person. I try to sit at least 80 times a year, so I'm out in the woods a lot. I've had a few things happen over the years that were kind of unexplainable, but nothing like this, that's for sure. I got there quite a bit before shooting light. I like to get in a couple hours before dark to let everything calm, or before light to let everything calm down. I was walking out to my stand, and I noticed quite a few deer out in the cornfield already, so I kind of hunkered down, and I didn't move. I wanted to wait for the sun to come up a little bit so I could get to my stand quietly, you know, not disturb anything. So as I'm sitting there watching out into the cornfield, I noticed a big, dark-shaped object, which I've seen a lot of bears on this property before, and I thought that this was a bear. So I finished walking to my tree stand. I got climbed up in when the sun come up, and it was kind of uneventful. Everything was really, really quiet. The birds weren't chirping. The deer were acting very skittish. My wind was actually blowing right to the deer, and instead of looking at me, they were all looking out into the cornfields at what I thought was a bear at the time. So as the hunt's winding down, I'm starting to have like an uneasy feeling, which...
Well, you don't start off with villagers,
sure
hey? That's weird.
Anybody who spent as much time in the woods as I have, there's just some days you get that weird uneasy feeling. So I decided before dark I was going to get down a little bit early, and I was going to take an alternate route back to my truck.
Interesting.
Because I didn't want to, have a run-in with the bear as he's coming back into the woods. So I got down, I made my way back to the truck, and as I get to my truck, I noticed what I thought was the bear standing across the clearing from where my truck was parked. It looked like it was sitting down staring at me. And I thought, well, that's kind of odd. So I'm loading up my stuff, and I reach in and I start my truck. And as I did that, it stood up on 2 feet, and it ran right up the trail. I mean, it could have went anywhere else. It could have went behind it. It could have went anywhere else, but it ran up the trail, and it jumped across the trail that my truck was parked on. And it scared the daylights out of me. I mean, it was 8 foot tall. It had shoulders that were 4 foot across, and it ran 200 yards in 14 or 15 strides. It was absolutely incredible how big and fast this thing was. And I know a bear doesn't run on 2 legs.
Yeah, how far away from you was this creature when you first saw it and you thought it was a bear? And then what kind of a distance is it away as you're back at your truck and it's jumping across that road?
It was inside 150 yards every time I seen it. From where I first seen it in the cornfield,
I think I messed up. I'm going to get
to where it went, and it was watching my truck and watching me leave, it was only 200 yards. So in my head, this creature, this Bigfoot, what I think it is, only went 200 yards in a 6-hour period of time just to see, or just to watch me leave, and that's what creeped me out the most. Is that, it must have seen me come in, and it only went to that point to watch me leave, and there's a couple other like weird things happening that year. The corn on this piece of property, it's a big piece of property, it's 2,500 acres, and there hasn't been corn in this back field in 15 years, which made the deer hunting incredible. I think that's the main reason for this thing being there. And the last time that this was corn was another experience that happened to my father and I. It was just something screamed at us as we were getting back to our vehicle from hunting again. So it was a lot of strange things happen when there's corn in this back field. And I think it's because it's getting more deer to come out of these big pockets of woods, and I think it kind of like its main hunting ground when the corn's back there. And it's always been a weird thing.
Yeah, it sounds like a perfect ambush spot for these things, and obviously for hunters, because you're doing the same thing, or you may have been doing the same thing this thing was doing. When you first see it, it's down like a bear, and then you said it took off. Did it get up like a man and run on 2 legs?
Yes, 100%. The way it stood up he turned and ran all at the same time. How it almost appeared to have no, like, neck. It was like head to shoulders. It was just so huge and muscular. The only thing I think of when I was watching this was, that thing can flip my truck if it wants to. I've got to leave. And that's what I did. It was almost like I didn't even know what was happening until I got out to the main road. Like, oh my gosh, I just seen a Bigfoot. Something I never expected to happen. I've heard the stories, but there it was.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, Trevor, but it sounds like when it got up and it took off running, it wasn't running away. It was running closer to you to get a better look at you.
Yeah, it was almost like a bluff charge, and not like a charge, but like it didn't want me to drive the rest of the way up that trail. It wanted me to turn around and leave, and it was taking a better vantage point by running to where it ran because it was thicker there, and it definitely had the upper hand because that's its home. It's not mine.
You had kind of mentioned there in the beginning that you had heard the stories, and was it family members that you were hearing these stories from?
Yeah, so my dad, he told me at one point when I was a kid that he was walking down the trail, and this was back by that cornfield. There's a trail that runs alongside an old dried up creek bed, and before it got logged off, it was really, really good hunting back there. And he said he remembers walking down that trail, headed back to his bow stand. He said that he seen a squirrel run up a tree, and the next thing he knows, there was a rock rolling off the base of the tree out in the middle of the trail. And he thought to himself, that's funny. Why are these squirrels carrying rocks up trees? And him and I had quite a few discussions,
It's not
especially
what it was. Nope.
what I seen.
Wasn't a squirrel.
And the times that him and I got screamed at, which was a whole different thing.
Is it though?
But we both kind of came to the conclusion that squirrels aren't carrying rocks up trees. It was probably something throwing rocks at him, not wanting him to go back there at that time. And then the time him and I got screamed at was actually on the same trail that the rocks were being thrown at him, the same trail I parked at, and I had my encounter. I was 12 years old at the time, and I just started bow hunting. Him and I were walking back down that trail. It's quite a hike back in there, good half, 3/4 of a mile. And it was, again, one of those nights where, like the night I had my encounter, that everything was quiet, deer were acting funny, and there weren't even bugs chirping, which is odd. And on this night, my dad, who has been hunting, since he was 12 years old, and I've never seen him do this, he got down onto his stand early. And he walked over to my stand, and he's like, let's get out of here. And as we get back to the truck, he's taking a leak, and I'm throwing my stuff in. And right 15 yards from where we just walked, the hill kind of, it crossed right there and goes down the trail. We heard something scream, this guttural scream that, it wasn't a bobcat, it was nothing we had ever heard in the woods. As loud as you could possibly imagine, and it was almost like it tickled your bones. It was so loud. I jumped in, threw my stuff in, and I started his truck, and he kind of looked at me through the back window like, what in the hell was that? And when he seen the terror on my face, he jumped in, and we were down and gone out of that trail as fast as you could think, and he, still to this day, he looks at me like, what do you think that was? And I say, you know what it was. And we kind of chuckle about it. That was like the first thing that made me truly believe there's something else out there, is when that happened to us.
Yeah, I know off the air you were telling me about different family members that had seen the creature, and after you had your encounter, do you still go back to that property and hunt?
Yep. It's funny, after I had that happen, it was 2 weeks before I actually went and sat, but I didn't tell anybody about it. I didn't tell my fiance. But I'd drive out there, and I'd shut my truck off. I'd park in the exact same spot. I'd shut my truck off. When I was sitting there in the dark, I couldn't bring myself to go out hunting. I'd start my truck up. I'd drive into town. I'd have breakfast. And I'd come home, and I'd say, yep, I went out, and everything was fine. After 2 weeks, I told myself, I can't do this. It's, you know, I love hunting. I've been out in those woods my whole life. I know what I saw, and if I can come to peace with that, and everything's gonna be fine. I don't think it was. I think it wanted to observe me, and it wanted to know what I was doing. But an animal that big and that smart, if it wanted to harm me, it could, and it could without me ever even knowing it was there. So I've kind of come to peace with it now. It still does terrify me. It's still at the back of my mind every time I go in the woods. It's strange. It really is. But yes, I do go back to that property. I do still hunt. I enjoy hunting. But
Good man.
it's something that is there. Everybody should know it's there, and everybody should have it in their mind that there are bipedal creatures that live in the woods, and if they want to harm you, they can.
Yeah, I think that's a good mindset to have. I still would be careful going out there. You know, your encounter happened in 2021. How long has your family owned this piece of property?
Over 100 years. It's a bicentennial farm or something like that.
Yes, sir.
So it's been in the family quite a long time.
Yeah, that's really cool. Long time to have a piece of property within a family. During that, it doesn't really sound like it almost sounds like they reside there, like they aren't just passing through because other family members have seen the creature beyond you and your father.
Yeah, as far as I can tell, I've heard stories from my great uncles, so I know at least back to the 60s or 70s in the area there's been sightings, and my dad, a few miles down the road when he was a kid, actually I've heard the story from him and his best friend, who's like an uncle to me. They told the exact same story about seeing something walk down a trail on 2 feet at them. So
I like the fact that you were skeptical. You know, you were hearing it from family members, but you know, you were skeptical when you went out there, and then you had this sighting. And have you had a chance to really walk around that property to see, you know, maybe where they're on the property, or has there been anything strange that you've seen?
I've covered every square inch of that property. It actually butts up to miles and miles and miles of the Manistee National Forest. There's places back in there that are, a lot of these places don't get touched. It's very, very hilly. There's water, there's cover, and there's plenty of food. It's the perfect area for one to live. When I started hunting again after my encounter, as I'm pulling into a different parking spot, I noticed these branches, 5 branches stacked up like a teepee, and I didn't even know any of this. Like, this was a thing. It was like it looked like a structure. I'm like, man, that's kind of weird. Who's out here stacking those branches like that? So I go about hunting, had a good night. I shot a nice 8-point, and I come back out to the truck, and I'm going to make a phone call to get some help, and my tire's flat. And I just got these tires put on, so I'm like, oh man, it must have been a seal or something. So I have to have my buddy come out and bring me some tools, a jack, to get my tire changed, on top of getting deer out of the woods. And as I'm sitting there, I see across the field, up in the woods, what looks like a camera flash, and it didn't stop. It was like 30, 40 times. It's like, what in the hell is going on? There's somebody up there taking pictures, but who's going to be out in the middle of nowhere I mean, there's just 2,500 acres. There shouldn't be anybody out there. So then I started thinking it's one of those old trail cameras that use flash. So I started making calls to everybody who has access to the property. And nobody has a trail camera out there. There's nothing. So
Orbs.
It's weirding me out at this point that all this stuff is happening. It's crazy. And my buddy, who's coming out to help me, he's a very, very, very big skeptic. He doesn't believe in anything. He's a radiologist. He works at the hospital. He is skeptical. When he gets there, I tell him, you know what? How about you don't worry about doing anything. I want you to watch that wood line. So I'm taking the tire off, getting it switched out, and he goes, whoa, what was that? I said, what? He said, nothing, my eyes are playing tricks on me. And 2 seconds later, he goes, nope, my eyes aren't playing tricks on me. I think there's a camera up there. There's somebody up there in the woods taking pictures. I said, yeah, that's what I thought too, but I've made phone calls and there's nothing up there. So that's another unexplainable thing that happened that year that I've never seen again, is these weird camera flashes in the woods, which happen to be the same woods, the edge of the same woods that I had my encounter.
Yeah, that's weird about the flash of light you guys were seeing. After your encounter, did you go back through that cornfield and see if you could find any tracks or anything like that?
Yep. There was nothing. Absolutely nothing. But it was very wet and rainy during that time too. So, I mean, obviously I didn't go out the next day, which I should have, and look for tracks, because I was still pretty shaken up. But I did walk around that area quite a bit when, you know, the shock wore off and the curiosity kicked in. And there was quite a few of those TP-like structures back in some of them hills. Like I said, the light was very odd. The deer movement, and we do find a lot of dead deer out there without bullet wounds or... You know, there's a very healthy deer population. I'll see 60 to 80 deer a night, but I don't think that many deer should just be dying unless they're being poached, which I don't feel like I don't feel like that's the case. There's no bullet holes in these deer. They're just dead deer. We've had a couple tested, and they're not diseased. They're just dead deer. And some of them are, you know, missing legs or jaws. It's weird. Very, very weird.
Yeah, definitely weird for sure. I'd be careful out there, man. I realize no one's been hurt, but I would just be kind of leery when you're on that property. And I know you love to hunt, and you're going to keep going, and just be careful would be my only advice if anyone's asking. I ask everyone on the show, Trevor, what do you think Sasquatch is? And I'm curious what your opinion is. And obviously, there's no wrong answer.
I think that it's a giant human-like bipedal creature that is smarter than most animals. I don't think it's an alien. I think it is an animal. But I don't really know. I know what I saw. I know what I've seen. I know what is there. Until we catch one, until we kill one, I don't know if we're ever gonna know until that time.
Yeah, it's a fair answer, and you're right. No one's really gonna know until we capture, you know, or kill one. You know, you got a really good look at it going from all fours up to 2 legs, all in one motion, and taking off. And I wonder sometimes if they're natural. And do you think it's a natural animal? Would you put it like in that category?
I think it is. Yep. I think it's a natural animal that it's just able to adapt to its surroundings, blend in. I think people get a lot closer to them than they ever even realize because they're so good at camouflaging themselves in. They're so good at blending in, and they're definitely fast enough, strong enough to get out of the way and get through things. So I think if they don't want to be seen, they don't want to be heard, they don't have to be.
Yeah, and you could be right. I really want you to be right. I would love for it to be nothing more than just an animal we haven't caught up with. But, be careful on this property. I know you guys haven't had anything major yet happen, but just be careful and let me know next hunting season if anything happens out there. I'd be really curious to see if they're still around or not. But I really appreciate you taking the time to come on and share your encounter, Trevor. I enjoyed chatting with you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your time as well.
Next up on the show, I want to welcome Mike. Mike, thanks for coming on.
Hey, Wes. How you doing? Pleasure to be here.
Pleasure's mine, Mike, for sure. And I know I want to talk to you about this home that you own and some of the things that are going on there. But before we get into that, you had an incident take place in 2017. You were with a buddy of yours. If you would kind of start from the very beginning, I know this is upstate New York. What were you guys doing and what happened?
So, me and a buddy of mine, we've been best friends since like the 4th grade. And we do a lot of hunting and fishing together, every chance we get. So we go up to Schuylerville, New York. It's probably about 40 minutes or so north of Saratoga. And there's a river there. It's called the Battenkill River that spills into the Hudson River. And it's got a good amount of ducks in there, geese and ducks. And we love to duck hunt. So there was a small, I guess you would call it was a private camping ground, for lack of a better term. They had skeet shooting there. They had, you could park a trailer there and stay there for the summer. And you had to pay a fee to be in there. So we found out about that place, and it was literally right on that river. So we went there, and we, paid our dues for the year. It really wasn't much. And then that October, opening day, around that second week in October, we decided we're going to go, do some duck hunt. The wood ducks that time of year, early in the year, is the best time to go. So we get out there, and anybody who duck hunts knows you got to be set up before the sun comes up. They fly when that sun comes up, and you got to be ready for it. So it was dark when we got there. We had our headlamps on and all that. Had my a 14-foot John boat, little electric outboard, nothing loud. We were in the water, and we headed out to our spot. We had our blind set. We were going to set up our blind and then put our decoys in. So, we get in the water, and we're chugging along for a couple minutes. It wasn't, that stretch to Battenkill wasn't that large. So it really didn't take us much time to get to where we were going. And about, a couple minutes in, we're just, BSing and talking about strategy and what we're going to do and how we're going to set them up. And all of a sudden, out of the corner of my eye, now the sun is just getting up, so there's a little residual light. And the Battenkill where we were fishing has, you're down in like a little ravine. There's some, I wouldn't call them mountains, but sizable hills on either side of you. And I catch movement out of the corner of my eye, and as I look, I see a huge rock. Like I said, it had to be the size of